All right, welcome back to the CAPodcast. I hope the sound is a little bit better. I know it's always been relatively quiet, but last week I recorded it on like the wrong setting or whatever, so it sounded terrible. So hopefully things are sounding a little bit better. Definitely, obviously open to feedback, but so I mean this is our first official podcast of the year. I know we had a little preview last week, a keeper preview, but this is things are official now. The draft is in the books. Everyone had a good time on Saturday. Some people had a better time than others, but it was definitely a lot of fun. So obviously good getting together with everyone. And so this podcast is going to be a little bit of draft review. So, I mean, mostly good, mostly bad. Not exactly going to be handing out grades because obviously at this point in the season, there's really no guarantee with certain players. I might think they're bad, and they might turn out to have great seasons. So I'm really just going to go team by team and just kind of point out what I thought were good and bad picks. So start with Denenberg. I thought he had a pretty decent draft. Really what it looks like is the steal of the draft might be Mike Wallace, who I know today reported to Steelers camp and, might maybe get a little time in their fourth preseason game and is definitely going to be ready to start the season. So I think he kind of knew all along that he wasn't going to get paid. He just was sort of maybe just skipping training camp or, just kind of showing that he was pissed off. But really, I mean, he's going to be the same Mike Wallace, it seems like. I don't see why he would be any different. And Denenberg was able to get him for only $19. So he's in pretty good shape. He spent a lot of money on Maurice Jones-Drew, but so there's a little bit of uncertainty there, but I would say Maurice Jones-Drew, he's just holding out. He's not injured, so he's a little bit different from like Chris Johnson last year, who is like a pure speed guy. For Maurice Jones-Drew to come back from training camp from a holdout and just show up for week one, it's really kind of realistic that he could play. So other than that, I thought Denenberg rounded out his team pretty well. It took a flyer on Randy Moss, took a flyer on Nick Foles. So pretty good draft by Denenberg, I felt. Looking at Arielle, I thought he made a couple of good moves. I think for him getting Des Bryant at $21 is definitely a bargain. I think that's a great deal. Bryant is, obviously has some problems. He has some injury issues, and he definitely has some off-the-field issues. But he, could really be a good receiver. He's got all the physical tools. Trust me, I know. I drafted him last year. So Bryant could be really good for that price. He's definitely good. I mean, that's obviously puts him in good keeper territory. A pick of Arielle's that I thought was just brutal, and I made sure to tell him this afterwards, was Kevin Smith for $14. I understand that the opportunity is there. I understand that Kevin Smith is going to be the Lions starting running back, but as I told Arielle when we were playing beer pong later that night, Kevin Smith, I don't think will play one full game for the Lions this year. He's already hurt. They'll probably trot him out there. In the first quarter, he's going to shatter his face or ankle or whatever, and he's going to be done. Kevin Smith is a ghost. This is like a Cubs fan in 2005 telling you how Mark Pryor was going to win the Cy Young and get him back to the World Series. So, Kevin Smith I think was a total waste. Des Bryant was a good pick. The rest of his squad as keepers, look pretty good. He's got a lot riding on Roethlisberger. Obviously was able to do a little wheeling and dealing, some trades with Plotzker that I'm going to touch on a little bit later to help improve his squad. So next up, Bootsy. Honestly, I thought Bootsy really has the best all-around draft. I think he has a ton of upside. Obviously, a lot remains to be seen with some of his picks. He's got guys like RG3 who's never played a game, but I think obviously is poised to be pretty good. He got Donald Brown, Pierre Garçon, Victor Cruz, some of these guys who have had some minor success, but really nothing sustained. These aren't superstars, but he was able to get them all for good prices. I think that getting Greg Jennings for $41, if you look at some of the other bigger wide receivers, was a pretty good price. So really, I thought Bootsy had a really solid draft. I think he's going to have a good team this year. If you look at Oaks, Oaks, he had a very interesting draft strategy. He just went super hard at quarterbacks, walked away with, arguably the top two quarterbacks. Me and him had a little bidding war for Brady, but he walked off with Rodgers and with Cam Newton. He kept Darian Foster, and so he's also, done a little bit of drunken wheeling and dealing to get himself Adrian Peterson as well. So, if you look at that core four, there's really not a better core four in the league. Oaks is in really good shape in that regard, but the rest of his team, as a result of his, early spending, is just really just brutal. He's got T.O., who he's obviously dropping tonight when waivers process. He's got Braylon Edwards. He's got Rashard Mendenhall. These guys really don't seem to factor in. He's got Whedon and Tannehill, so he's got a little security at quarterback, but really those guys, who knows how good they're going to be. He's got Mike Williams from Tampa Bay, Pettigrew, Noshawn Moreno, Sidney Rice, Kenny Britt, Jonathan Stewart. I mean, all these guys are just brutal injuries waiting to happen. So, I mean, really with Oaks, it's going to be a story of those 4 guys. If he can get really elite production from all 4 of those guys, Cam, Rogers, AP, and Foster, then he'll compete, and he might be able to make some waiver moves and turn his team into something a little bit better. Looking at Plotzker's team, I mean, I have in front of me the sheet that is the team that he drafted. It's definitely a little bit different from the team that he has right now. What I thought was a great pick by him was Mark Ingram for just $9. I think Ingram is ready to take over. I think that's an offense that they're going to maybe switch up their MO a little bit and run it. Ingram actually had a pretty decent year last year. He's another year better. He's another year healthier. So I think Ingram for $9 was a steal. Plotzker, he went back to the well with Michael Vick. He, is obviously a big Vick fan. I got him for slightly cheaper than some of the other top-tier quarterbacks, so that's a good gamble for him. That'll probably end up paying off, although he better hope it pays off because he's a little hurting for quarterbacks right now. And if you look a little bit further down Plotzker's list, you see, what I'm preliminarily naming as the worst pick in the draft. I think y'all know Beanie Wells for $26. It's not even that Beanie Wells is that bad of a player because he is the starter for the Cardinals. He was a high draft pick. He's, a lot is expected of him. It's not really a passing offense other than Larry Fitzgerald. So, Beanie Wells definitely has some good opportunity. But he's, really injury prone and, hasn't really done it that much yet. But it's not really the player that makes this the worst pick. It was the matter of fact in which Plotzker escalated the bid to $26. I believe it was standing at $3 when it came to him. I don't think the competition was that fast and furious for Beanie Wells. I think that Plotzker probably could have walked off with Beanie Wells for something in the neighborhood of like $6, $7 maybe. So that was, not a wise move from an otherwise wise man. Moving on, looking at Ben's team. Ben, I thought actually had a pretty good draft. I thought getting Roddy White for $47 was a total steal. Roddy White is a beast and has proven to be nothing but, in every year he's played, he's just been nasty. So to get him for $47, which is, considerably cheaper than some of the other big-name wide receivers, I thought was a really good move for him. I thought getting Trent Richardson for $53 was a little bit too high. I mean, that's definitely a high price for a kid who just had knee surgery and who's never played it down in the NFL. But there's also no other offense in town. So he's really the show for the Browns. He's a young kid. If this knee problem is behind him, he's a good keeper. So I thought that was a good pick, even though it might have been a little bit of expensive. Really, what I thought Ben's worst pick is Jermichael Finley for $13. I thought that was a terrible pick. I think Jermichael Finley sucks. To be that athletic and to be that gifted and be in that offense with that quarterback and to only put up I think he had 5 touchdowns last year. I know 3 of them were in one game against the Bears. It's just pathetic. He's got a shitty attitude. He's a shitty player, and I think $13 was a total waste of money. Fortunately for Ben, though, he did manage to get Jacob Tamme for $0 once all the money was gone, so that was a nice grab for him. I would imagine that by week 3 or 4, he's going to be starting Tamme over Finley anyways. So moving on, looking at Krause's team. Krause has done a little bit of wheeling and dealing himself. I know he kicked away some of the quarterbacks that he had drafted, but I thought he did a pretty good job. I thought keeping Fitzpatrick was the right move. I thought keeping Welker was definitely, for that price, definitely made sense. Krause always sort of drafts in the same way. He always kind of hangs back and then says what good players are left and ridicules people that have spent all their money early. But I don't know, his draft doesn't really wow me that much. I think getting Bradford for $22 was a really good move by him. I think Bradford, obviously I thought this last year and it didn't turn out too well for me, but I think Bradford has really good upside. So I think that's a good move for Krause. I think Chris Johnson obviously is ready for a pretty good season. Krause's wide receivers worry me a little bit. He's, there's some upside there, and he obviously spent most of his money on Jimmy Graham, who's pretty nasty, and he's got Gates. I mean, he's got 2 of the top 3 tight ends, which is definitely impressive. But his wide receivers, really, other than Welker, he's got Jerome Simpson, he's got John Baldwin, he's got James Jones. So these are, not exactly a great group. If you look at my team, I mean, really, I thought that my plan was pretty obvious coming into it. I made that pretty clear early as I think Jay Cutler, wasn't he the first player taken? I don't know. Either way, I had a QB triumvirate in my mind of Luck, Cutler, and Brady, and I was not going to be deterred from that group. So I was definitely taking those three. I bid whatever it was going to take on Brady. I actually was pretty close to jumping off the train on Cutler. I forget if it was Denenberg or if it was Ben that I was bidding on Cutler with, but I was pretty close to jumping off. I had only budgeted like $45 for him, and I bid up to $51, but I'm happy with Cutler. I think I learned the hard way last year that, if you don't have a quarterback, you're in a lot of trouble in this league. So I made sure I went out and got 3 of them. Actually, I tried to get 4. I thought I could walk off with Christian Ponder. That didn't really work out. The worst bid on my team, but the biggest mistake I made was just brutally overbidding on Justin Blackmon. I do think Justin Blackmon will be good. I think he's, obviously he's in a shitty offense. Gabbert's miserable, and that O-line is no good. But Blackman's just a beast. He's kind of a physical monster. I think that he's the only wideout on that team that's going to catch any touchdowns. So, I think he's in a pretty good position, but $15 is way too much. If you look at, I got Stevie Johnson for $16, who's obviously a much better receiver, and then I got Demaryius Thomas for $10 for $5 less. You could make the argument that Demaryius Thomas is better than Blackmon. So I spent too much on him, but that's okay. I blame Oaks. Moving on, looking at Smith. This is his first time drafting in the league. I thought he did a pretty good job. I thought he is treading in some dangerous territory trading with Krause. It's a rough awakening to move into this league and have Krause start pressuring you for trades early. But, I don't think that trade's that bad. But really he ended up trading Rivers to get some quarterback assistance. I mean, Smith desperately needed quarterback help. He, was playing with fire, having Tebow being his second quarterback. That's not a very good move. So he ends up locking up Palmer and Fitzpatrick. I think he still could use a little bit more help. Maybe if John Skelton sucks, then Kevin Cobb, who is on Smith's bench, turns into a pretty good starter. I thought that Smith drafting Miles Austin for $10 was a bargain. I thought that was a great move. Austin is, I feel like people are seriously underrating him this year. He had some injury problems last year. I know he's a little hamstrung. He's got a little bit of an injury this year, but I mean, honestly, he's a good athlete. He's their number one receiver in that offense, so I think he's in good shape. Overall, I thought Smith did pretty well, and I think the trade, we'll see about that one. Looking at Billy's team, Billy, I thought, overspent on Drew Brees. Overspent is a relative term because at that point, Brees was really the last top-tier quarterback, and I think Billy intelligently knew that you kind of have to have a top-tier quarterback to compete, so he spent whatever he had to do to get Drew Brees. So spent $110, more than Brady, actually more than Rodgers. So Brees, really was the most expensive player in the draft, which is kind of interesting. But, I think that speaks more to Billy's desperation as opposed to Brees' talent level. Getting Schaub for $61 is a good deal. Getting Steven Jackson for $59 I thought was a really good deal. I think he is ready for a really good season. People are kind of forgetting about him. I thought he might have overspent a little bit on Andre Johnson. I think Andre Johnson is, last year those injuries just are really disconcerting. Those are the types of injuries that kind of stick with you. It wasn't like he got hit and he's been rehabbing. It was like his legs are like giving out on him. So I don't know. That seemed kind of tough, but I might be wrong about that. And he's obviously got a pretty strong receiving core as he's keeping Julio Jones for a low price. That covers 10 of the teams. There's still 2 teams left. Before I get to them, though, I'm going to need to put on some spooky sound effects because these last 2 teams are in a place that I and Krause like to call the QB scare zone. That's right. It's the Brothers Deutsch, both of them in the QB scare zone. They're in a lot of trouble, I think. Brian is, I think the first quarterback he took was Jake Locker, who I know is the starter. But he's got Hasselbeck right behind him. Locker, he's never started an NFL game, so I think he could be in a lot of trouble, especially because his other quarterback is Matt Castle, who doesn't exactly, inspire that much confidence in me. And behind that, he doesn't really have any quarterbacks at all. So it's really those 2 guys. Obviously he skewed a little bit more towards running backs. He kept Fred Jackson. He's got Darren McFadden. So, it's not like his team is bereft of talent. I think getting Percy Harvin for $39 was a really good deal. I think Reggie Wayne for $5 is a total steal. But just that QB scare zone, you got to watch out. Speaking of QB scare zone, if you look at Justin, the kid's team, I think he's in a little bit of trouble as well. I mean, he's got Matt Ryan, although I do think he overspent for Matt Ryan. But really, at that point in the draft, it was, whatever it takes to get a decent quarterback. Matt Ryan should be pretty good this year. $88 seems a little steep. But And then his other quarterback's Russell Wilson. He's got on his bench, he's got Sanchez and Flynn. Flynn is a backup right now. Sanchez will be a backup shortly. So those two guys don't really bring much to the table. Wilson, I don't know. I mean, if you're Justin, you better be praying that Russell Wilson plays as well in the regular season as he's shown in the preseason. So either way, I don't mean to rag on those guys too hard. I don't think they're really that bad at teams, but they are in the QB scare zone. All right, and then finally, I do want to address a little bit of the shenanigans that went down after the draft. Plotzker went on a drunken trade Apalooza that, obviously Plotzker, he's an intelligent guy. He gets hammered all the time, so I'm sure he, much like all of us, takes full responsibility for what they do when they're drunk. I don't think that being inebriated in any way, sharpens his, or dullens his intellect in any way. I still think he's sharp. I think he knows what he's doing when he's hammered, but still, some of these trades were a little questionable. And honestly, I went back and looked through, and I couldn't make too much sense of them because there was a lot of give and take. There was a lot of back and forth. Arielle was involved somehow. But really, what it boils down to is Plotzker gave away Adrian Peterson to Oaks for 33 future auction dollars. And now this is Adrian Peterson that earlier in the evening he had drafted for 63 2012 auction dollars, which, I don't know, to me, I understand that there is some sort of dynamic that Plotzker's trying to explain about future auction dollars, how they're, more valuable and whatever. And that might be the case. That might be true. But it's a little early for a white flag trade, in my opinion, especially in division to hook up Oaks with AP. I don't know about that. Then Plotzker gave Eli Manning to Arielle for Alex Smith, Antonio Brown, and Jeremy Maclin, and 13 future auction dollars. I thought this was a terrible trade. I think Eli is fantastic. He's a great quarterback. I think he's a top-tier quarterback. And I think Plotzker, his other big quarterback is Michael Vick, and Vick is always going down for injury. If Vick goes down, now he doesn't have Manning, I think he's in a lot of trouble. So I thought this was a terrible move. I do like Antonio Brown. I do like Jeremy Maclin. I think Alex Smith is fine. Future auction dollars are great. But I don't know. To give up on Eli, I think Plotzker's it's a white flag this early in the season. Then he gave Brandon Marshall and Antonio Brown, who had just recently acquired to Krause, for 27 future auction dollars. So this is putting Plotzker with, by my math, 73 auction dollars for next year. So of 373 going into the draft as it stands right now. And then also he, I think, gave Alex Smith back to Arielle for Christian Ponder, and then also giving up $2. I wasn't too sure about that. So I don't know. It seemed interesting. Plotzker, I would welcome a statement from you to explain your thought process and how it leaves your team in a better position. If you can email that out to the league, I think that would be much appreciated. But otherwise, I thought it was a good draft. Thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Thank you for all your contributions, all your picks, good and bad. Obviously they're the inspiration. So good luck this year. Game on Wednesday, the Giants and the Cowboys. A week from tomorrow is when the league is starting. So we're getting after it. We're excited. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next week.